So, hikers of Reddit, what is the strangest things you've seen on the trails? A horse having its bum licked by a goat that was on a rock, like, as if it was standing on a box, to reach the horse better. On the way down a small mountain hike with some friends, we spot another hiker alone coming up the trail towards us. When we get in talking range he says, "You'll want to see this cool dance," then proceeded to do the Rick and Morty Get Swifty song, full squatting down and everything. Then stands straight and says, "Have a good trip and stay safe," then keeps walking. Never seen anything more strange on a hike. Not mine, but my uncle's story. He was out on his land planning next year's feed plots. He walked down the path that led to the river and spotted a tent. Then he spotted a woman. The woman walked towards him. He was still, and likely dressed in camo. She kept walking, closer and closer, until just feet away. She then squatted, and dropped a deuce. He reached into his pocket, gently handing a handkerchief through a gap in the leaves. She ran, tripped, ran more. Found out that the corner of my uncle's property was a former hippie colony abandoned in the 80s. Children of the first generation had started to return. I pulled up to a trail I frequented with my then girlfriend and saw a ton of state police, county sheriffs, investigators in full hazmat suits with respirators, and a huge state crime scene investigation van. There were remains dumped within sight of the trail, and, as we walked by, I said passively, "I don't think those were there the other day" to my girlfriend. One of the police officers heard me, and I ended up having to give an overly detailed report and all my information to them, because at the time they had nothing else to go on. Never heard anything else about it. In a swamp in Florida I found a picture of a high school age girl, looked like a graduation picture, stabbed into the ground by a kitchen knife, and surrounded by black candles. Also had an old naked barefoot hippie lady come jogging up a mountain past me on the Blue Ridge Parkway in North Carolina. A man resembling Santa wearing nothing but granny panties. I saw a coyote looping over a hilltop, continuing along the ridge. Then, about 20 yards behind it, a deer chasing it. Looked like a couple of cartoon animals. One time when I was in a hike, I saw a group of dead squirrels. And when I say group I'm not fucking around. There were at least 10 squirrels just laying there bloody with guts everywhere. I was alone, and ran away from there, as I thought there might be a predator around. I was bushwhacking near my house when I heard some rustling in front of me and saw a large grizzly bear bolting in the opposite direction. Adrenaline kicked in immediately and I ran back along the trail over a creek. Hear water thrashing down the creek, see the bear charging at me, and we both said, "Oh shit," and ran in opposite directions. I was lucky he wasn't hungry that day. I was on a day hike in Sedona, Arizona with an older friend who's lived in the area for decades. It was a hike up the side of a canyon wall to a small, unnamed ruin with a beautiful view of the surrounding area. It's one of those unofficial trails that the old timers guard carefully to keep the tourists away and would be almost impossible to find unless a local brought you there. I was honored to be trusted with this secret trail knowledge. My friend is kind of old school and a bit shy, so when I had to stop for a pee break, I walked through the bushes as far from the trail as I safely could, so he wouldn't feel embarrassed. I found a good spot near the edge of a steep drop-off that was smooth and cactus-free. The moment I dropped my pants and started peeing, with my bits facing downhill toward the drop-off, I heard a low whooshing sound and a motherfucking Red Rock helicopter came rising straight out of the canyon directly in front of me. I figured there was only one thing I could do in a situation like that. I gave them a big smile and a friendly wave. I lived in a national park by myself for 3 months. Several times when I was going back to my trailer for the day, I would hear music like a music box or an ice cream truck. It was always loud and sounded like it was coming from somewhere over my head. One day I decided to look for the source, so I followed the dirt road past my trailer. The music continued. I couldn't tell if I was getting closer or not. I had my eyes on the trees and looked down just in time to avoid stepping on a snake. I scrambled back, but it didn't move. I realized it was dead, and it wasn't alone. There were half a dozen dead copperheads stretched out in the road, looking in the same direction. I went back to get my car, because I couldn't bring myself to step over them, but by the time I got my keys, the music had stopped, and I didn't hear it again. Came across a homeless person's shelter. It had been abandoned long ago, but the person had caged a turtle, no doubt found in the nearby creek. They're somewhat common. Anyway, they'd abandoned the site and the turtle, which I suspect starved to death. It was a shell and skeleton when I found it. That sticks with me. The shelter was really low profile, and I realized why weeks later. I'd also found a Tupperware box with things stolen from the parking lot that was in view, but the shelter would have been an excellent vantage point to watch hikers drive in and walk into the woods. This person could then pop out of the shelter and sack the car for money, smokes, and all the random shit I found in the Tupperware container. Shit that a pawn shop wouldn't take. 2 guys digging a hole at 2 AM. Shit was weird. They noticed us, then called us over, but we just took off running. I was walking along a dead silent trail when I heard what sounded like a shotgun going off, echoing through the forest. I frantically looked around trying to figure out who the fuck is shooting, when I see a large tree 40 feet away start falling over and topple into the forest. The base of the trunk had just exploded, and the whole tree just gave way. No idea why. It wasn't freezing, windy, or had rained a lot recently, and the tree was pretty young. But boy did that scare me, and I have a new appreciation of passing trees near the trail. Not my story, but my dad's, actually. I was probably around 8 or 9 and was around the corner while my dad and his friend were ahead of us. They were having a conversation about trees falling in the woods and if they make a sound. My dad says, if a tree falls in the woods and a huge oak fell right in front of them, blocking the rest of the trail, myself and the other kids ran to see what happened around the bend because we heard the crash and my dad and his friend looked like they had just seen a ghost. Wasn't me but a stranger, just something personally related to me. A good friend of mine went missing for around 7 months in 2019 and 2020, and everybody suspected her boyfriend, but he was already sentenced and imprisoned for unrelated crimes by the time it was certain something had happened, so he was essentially rooted in place, while law enforcement was trying to figure everything out and find her. Months and months into the investigation, which had really stalled due to the pandemic, a hiker happened upon her corpse and only inspected it because she had been wearing a bright pink backpack, and he thought it may have been a child. As I heard it, it had been almost nightmarish for him because, without giving any nasty details, the nature of her death combined with decomposition made her look almost entirely inhuman but absolutely horrific. The poor dude ran out of the brush before he called the police and had to be gradually coaxed into guiding law enforcement to her body over the course of an afternoon. An old porcelain bathtub in the middle of the woods, at least 2 miles from the nearest road or house. A man wearing a Ku Klux Klan hat with eye holes, nothing else, masturbating. I biked past him in the woods on the way home in 7th grade. Yes, it was Florida. The strangest thing I have ever seen was somewhere in West Virginia years ago. Was hiking through the woods off trail, came across a big ass random field that was clearly someone's farm. I was about to go around until I noticed a bunch of people wearing what looked like cloth diapers and head wraps while burning a cross with a pig hanging from a chain. They were speaking in a language that I did not recognize. They saw me. We both had the deer in a headlight look for what felt like forever. A few started my way. I have never ran back up a mountain in the dark so fast for so long. I have no fucking clue what they were doing. I don't think I could find that place again if I wanted to. But West Virginia has some weird people in it. Strangest thing I saw in general was a dead dude wrapped in a tarp that fell off of someone's pickup truck. They came back and got it. Also found dead bodies buried in unmarked graves in the woods of some property I used to have. I was out for a run on a trail and heard this awful animalistic groaning sound. Like any idiot in a horror movie, I kept going to see what it was. I rounded the bend, and there next to an idyllic stream were 2 massive alligator snapping turtles fucking. The one mounting the other one actually made eye contact with me while he kept humping. 20 years later I'm still traumatized. A family having a picnic and eating McDonald's. This was 15 fucking miles into the hike. They walked 15 fucking miles on a steep hill to eat McDonald's. Thanks for watching the video. For more content like this, please subscribe, like, and share the video and push the notification button.